Hello, you're watching Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Samput. Welcome to your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. Today we look at the challenge of training African engineers while some bold entrepreneurs like our guest Gagan Gupta are building the industrial future of the continent. Well, it's time for Initiative Africa. Let's get on with the show with our top stories today. From accounting and management control in India, our guest this week seeks to revolutionize the industrial model in Africa. Gagan Gupta is behind successful public-private partnerships in Africa, and one such example is Gabon in the agri-food and infrastructure sectors. Today, at the head of the Arise IIP Investment Fund, he is extending his model of special economic zones and industrial parks to the rest of the continent. He's our guest today.
Arise's fundamental objective when we created Arise was to meet three global challenges. One was around unemployment, second around income inequality, and third about preserving nature and Mother Nature.
Meeting Africa's agricultural energy challenges as well as food security is the dream of these young engineering students in Douala.
I'm passionate about energy and in particular renewable energy and the idea of creating a startup in this field which will help to exploit the hydrographic power of our country more globally, of the sub-region and of the continent is something I'm looking forward to and which I will be proud of tomorrow.
Let's all hit the gym. Fitness centers are developing at full speed in Pointe Noire to meet the high demand for sports enthusiasts.
Je suis sollicité.
I'm overwhelmed.
Je ne travaille pas que dans une salle.
I don't just work in one gym, but in several.
Dans plusieurs salles.
I also coach several persons in their homes.
Plusieurs personnes.
With the rise in numbers of healthy African startups and the opportunities offered by the Continental Free Trade Agreement in trade and investment, Africa more than ever needs a skilled workforce. But where and how to train the continent's engineers? This is a key question, including for European universities, which no longer hesitate to multiply partnerships with African campuses. In Douala, Cameroon, our correspondent Maxime Farrell went to meet these young engineers of tomorrow who are determined to participate in the renewable energy revolution. Take a look. Kevin, a young engineering student majoring in general engineering in the international and innovation field, has been striving to tackle hunger in his country, Cameroon mainly, and also in Africa more generally. He and his classmate students at the UCAC Institute, the Catholic University of Central Africa, and the ICAM, group of French engineering schools, have just designed a drone with the capacity to boost the development of agriculture and hopefully do more.
Agribusiness is part of the culture of Cameroon today. It is the backbone of our economy, and using rural materials does not allow us to be productive and competitive in the market. Using a drone, for example, is a solution to bring more efficiency. We also thought that the drone would be suitable for taking pictures in different situations in case of disasters or other problems, a piece of equipment that can go where a man cannot and provide us a global picture of the situation.
With at least 905 students spread over the Douala campus in Cameroon and Pointe Noire in Congo for the past 21 years, the UCAC ICAM Institute, with the support of numerous partners in the CIMAC zone and the Democratic Republic of Congo, has been providing students with 5 years of professional training as general engineers who can intervene in most areas. Kevin, like Maela, a student in the same school specializing in process engineering, intend to fight against global warming at the origin of the climatic changes and upheavals that led to floods or droughts in Africa. For these young engineers, renewable energy, for example, can be part of the solution.
I'm passionate about energy and in particular renewable energy and the idea of creating a startup in this field which will help to exploit the hydrographic power of our country more globally, of the sub-region and of the continent is something I'm looking forward to and which I will be proud of tomorrow.
The world today is subject to many constraints, whether climatic or environmental. All this is due to global warming and the abusive use of fossil fuels. So our solutions are part of the ecological transition from fossil fuels to green energy. Why do we do this? To reduce our environmental impact, to reduce our CO2 production, to limit the greenhouse effect, and to be part of a sustainable development framework. Brian is another young engineer with big ambitions who works on cybersecurity. He plans to work on protecting data and information vital to protect the country's security.
It is a question, especially in African context, of being able to secure our information here and not just exporting it abroad to secure it. We can do it ourselves here. What I want to bring is, first of all, my expertise to show that all these banks, which are here in Africa, can test the equipment. For example, we can just easily do it here locally without necessarily bringing in foreign consultants or deploying the application to the foreign services to test it. My objective is to set up a protocol made by us Africans to encrypt information, better so that a third party cannot read the communication.
The acquisition and integration of knowledge and skills also relies on the quality of grassroots training.
We teach our students to learn continuously. We give them the tools to be in a long life learning cycle, upskilling and moving up the ladder, particularly through active learning in the skill-based and project-based approaches. This allows them to be relatively autonomous in their learning processes, autonomous in their approach to problems and autonomous in resolving situations. We want our engineers to have the capacity to deploy themselves in all different disciplines, industrial, scientific and even technical. We must instill in our engineer the ability to be up-to-date in terms of hindsight on society and the need to which they can provide solutions and produce value.
Beyond the genius, the will and the determination sometimes inspired by the models, these young engineers will need more to impact the development of African countries efficiently.
The different political systems should be designed in such a way as to allow young people like us to become entrepreneurs. But we also need the confidence of the various financiers and banks to access adequate funding and confidence to promote our abilities. Because among ourselves, we know that we are competent and capable of doing and making Africa proud. But for that to happen, we need to be given the means, we need to be given the opportunity, and we need to be trusted.
90% of the young engineers trained at this school are successfully integrated into the professional world. The UCAC ICAM Institute does not content itself with only growing its African leadership factory, but also offers non-compulsory exchange semesters from the 4th year onwards in the ICAM France sites or their partner universities worldwide. These young engineers generally work in their home countries. Some of them continue with a specialized master's or MBA to develop a specific skill abroad before returning home, while a small number prefer to start their professional career internationally.
It's time to meet our guest Gagan Gupta. He's behind the NCOC Special Economic Zone in Gabon, which you had the opportunity to discover in Business Africa last week. He explains how this model is enabling the creation of an effective industrial ecosystem and is changing the game for Africa's industrialization and exports. I met him in Libreville to better understand his vision. Hello Gagan Gupta, thank you for welcoming Initiative Africa here in Libreville.
Hi Asha.
Well, African countries are facing many challenges as high unemployment, lack of local processing, global warming. How can the industrial parks developed by ARISE IIP help to meet these challenges?
So, ARISE fundamental objective when we created ARISE was to meet three global challenges. One was around unemployment, second around income inequality, and third about preserving nature and Mother Nature. We believe for long Africa has been exporting raw materials, and when they export raw materials, it's like exporting employment. When you import finished products, you are actually importing unemployment, because when you export say a raw cashew or a raw timber, you keep only 5 to 10% of the overall value and there's no jobs being added. When you start transforming the product within the country, then you add the jobs, and also that does three things. First, when you are adding value within the country, then the owner of the resource, for example the farmer who's producing the cashew, gets the right price because you're eliminating all the middlemen in between. Secondly, in the process you end up creating jobs. Thirdly, from a Mother Nature perspective, all these products were actually getting going to say Asia and coming back to Europe, so creating the carbon footprint. So by industrializing within the country where the resource is being produced, you actually address all the three problems. And a live example is Gabon, which used to export round locks you visited this morning, and that was hardly creating any jobs. Now you saw this morning that the round locks are being converted into veneer, into plywood and furniture. About 10,000 people come to work in the industrial zone, and that's a good example how industrialization can help solve these three challenges.
How do ARISE IIP economic zones contribute to the industrialization of the African continent?
So I think we have to understand why the industrialization was not happening before, and what are the key bottlenecks why the industrialization was not happening. So if you look at Gabon or if you look at Benin, these countries have been exporting raw material for hundreds of years. And just because we are going to build an industrial zone does not mean the industrialization will happen. And we have to really understand the reasons why it was not happening. So if you look at, say, a Gabon or a Benin, what was typically happening was these raw materials getting exported raw. And why was that happening? Because there was no ecosystem. And what I mean by ecosystem, so there was no policy framework. So the countries didn't have clear laws as to what is the SEZ law, what is the law around transformation. So we work with the governments to create the policy framework, what I call as the soft infrastructure. The second part is we build the hard infrastructure. The hard infrastructure is about roads, water, electricity, effluent treatment plant. So when as an investor you come, you have all the common infrastructure ready, you can plug and play and start your industry. The third thing that we solve for is logistics. Typically in most of these countries, logistics was a bottleneck. So every industrial zone that we go, we end up building a dry port, we end up building warehousing, such that the customers, when they come, they don't have to invest in infrastructure. Fourthly, we plug all the gaps that are required from a training perspective. So we realize that, for example, if you're transforming timber, then we need people to be trained in timber sector. So we build a vocational training center where we can train people into timber sector. When we go to Benin, where we have built an industrial zone for cotton, there we have a training center training people on garmenting. So then we fill the vocational gap also. And by addressing all these four gaps, we actually ensure the industrialization can take place.
What strategies are being deployed by ARISE IIP to ensure long-term sustainability in value chains?
So one of the key differentiators for all the industrial zones ARISE is building. So we're building 10 industrial zones in Africa currently, and our key focus and key differentiator is sustainability. So sustainability for us is not a tick box, but it's very much ingrained in our business model. So right from the time the raw material is sourced from the farmers or from the forest, we ensure it's fully traceable, verifiable, and we can actually go down to trace down which farmer it came from or which GPS coordinate the product came from. So that ensure that you can trace the raw material. Secondly, for all the value chains that we operate, we do what we call as life cycle carbon assessment, which means we measure what is the carbon impact of this entire value chain, and we compare it to what was happening before the transformation is happening in the country. So if you look at, say, a cotton or a timber, we say earlier this timber from Gabon was going to China and coming back to Europe. What was the carbon footprint versus now getting transformed here and going to the end market? And all the value chains that we participate in, we ensure that there is a reduction in the overall climate impact and the carbon impact when compared to the past. Secondly, all the industrial zones are focused a lot on circularity. So this morning you would have visited the industrial zones you have seen. Before we came and built the industrial zone in Gabon, the timber utilization, so when you put 1 cubic meter of log for transformation, you were only using 40% and the rest 60% was going waste. Today, because the industrial zone, that has increased to over 80%. So even the waste you would have seen is now getting converted to particle board. That's a good example. Or you would have seen the plastic bottles being used as the packaging material. So that's how we have ingrained sustainability into what we are doing.
Since the launch of ARISE IIP's first special economic zone in Gabon, many new zones are now under construction or under development in more than 10 African countries. What are your ambitions?
So currently ARISE is in 10 countries. Out of that, we have Gabon. The Gabon industrial zone is focused on timber and it's currently operational. We have Benin industrial zone, which is focused on cotton, soya and cashew transformation, that's operational. We have Togo, which is focused on cotton, which is focused on soya and other agri products, that's operational. We have Ivory Coast, which is under construction. We expect it to be operational towards the end of this year. We are in Republic of Congo, which is focused on timber. We expect it to be operational this year. Then we are in Chad, in Nigeria, we are in Sierra Leone, and we expect that most of these zones will be operational either Q4 this year or Q1, Q2 next year. So fundamentally, ARISE vision is to ensure that each country focuses on transforming its raw material within the country and building industries for import replacement. So in the current phase of development, which ends in 2024, we will be operational in 10 countries. Post that, we'll start about another 5-6 countries in 2025. So our long-term vision is that we should be present in about 18 to 19 countries by end of 2025, and ensuring that by 2030 we have achieved our objective of creating 1 million direct jobs and adding close to $100 billion in additional GDP in Africa.
Welcome to the second part of our show. How can you get rid of your dark thoughts and maybe even a few extra kilos? In Pointe-Noire, the economic capital of Congo, there's a boom in startups specializing in sports and fitness. Is this a new economic opportunity? To learn more, our journalist Jean-David Mihamley followed the itinerary of a coach through the lenses of Brice Kinhu. Take a look. Pointe-Noire, the economic capital of Congo. We are in the Wild Coast area, on the fine sandy beach, and these Congolese are proudly working out. In a few months, the number of gyms and fitness clubs has doubled in Pointe-Noire. There are already 10 sports and fitness centers outside the major hotels in the city. Coach Desti alone oversees 3 gyms.
Yes, I'm overwhelmed. I don't just work in one gym, but in several ones. I also coach several persons in their homes.
Here
I'm the head coach. I teach at the beach. As I told you, I created a concept called No Limit. It helps those who don't really have the means to work out.
A monthly subscription in the gym varies on average between 25 and 100 euros. At a time when COVID-19 is ruining social ties and maintaining bloom, sports is seen as a lifeline, a bearer of hope.
Pour moi, le sport est la chose la plus importante.
Practicing a sport is vital at the moment.
Pour ne pas dire en termes de divertissement.
Not in terms of distraction or entertainment.
Le sport devient presque tout pour moi. Je sais maintenant.
Working out right now is all I have. I'm currently working out to improve myself in this field.
Je veux montrer aux gens que on peut se
I want to show people that you can exceed your limits.
De ses limites.
For this lady, a member of a fitness club in Pointe-Noire, sport confers health and well-being.
Practicing a sport helped me to keep healthy, avoid illness, and above all, be in good shape. With Coach Desti, things are going really well. He encourages us, motivates us to exceed ourselves.
Pointe-Noire already has 50 coaches trained on site by experienced mentors, or in South Africa or the Democratic Republic of Congo. The coach then advises sports activities to keep healthy.
Sport is not just about keeping healthy. Because sport is first and foremost something really natural. I advise people to practice sports activities as a preventive measure. I encourage those who don't have this motivation not to wait for the doctor to tell them to exercise.
The sector is monitored by the Ministry of Sports, which grants operating permits. Coach Desti believes that the sports sector to promote well-being is quite promising in Congo.
Generally back home in Africa, people think that athletes are people who have empty brains, who are not intellectuals, and that sport cannot pay the bills. Today, if I'm here now talking to you, it is thanks to sports. The sports that I teach people, which is good for them and pays my bills today.
be me if I chose.
Next year, Coach Desti in Zila plans to open 2 sports and fitness centres in Point Noir mainly.
Africa should be seen as an attractive market itself and not only as an exporter. Well, this is the bet of our guest, Gagan Gupta. In the second part of his interview, he explains how they are opening up the African special economic zones to attract businesses and promote Made in Africa. Let's listen to him. In your opinion, how does the current context marked by the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact of the Ukraine war and climate change, reshuffle the cards of the global value chains?
I think last 2-3 years have crystallized what was happening for last 10 years, but has really accelerated the realignment of global supply chains. And I'll put all the changes happening in probably 3-4 key buckets. The first bucket is around climate pressure. So if you roll back 10 years back, there was no discussion about climate in the supply chain. The discussion was how my supply chain can be the most cost efficient. It was not resilient. Today the discussion is changing and saying, is my supply chain sustainable? Which means people are now beginning to factor climate in the decision. The second change that is happening is, if you look back 10 years back, any boardroom discussion was around what is my China strategy? So how I'm going to be present in China? Today discussion is what is my China plus strategy? How will I have sourcing away just from China into multiple countries? So the whole supply chain is getting away from cost efficiency to resilience. I think during COVID, as you rightly pointed out, we saw that about 90% of mass was just coming from one country. The second big change that is happening is, earlier the European US countries were not so much focused on sourcing from Africa. Now as they start thinking that they need to start sourcing from other parts of the world, that's changing. The third thing that is changing is the demographics itself. So if you see, China is decreasing labor, the per capita GDP is increasing. So some of the industries which were viable in China are no longer viable, and those industries will move to different geographies. And we have seen that in the past. If you look at in the past, the entire textile industry was in UK, then it moved to China, and I think textile industry will move away from China to other parts of the world. So I think the confluence of things that happened in last 4 years is accelerating shift of industrialization away from Southeast Asia to Africa, or I would more put it to where either the resources or where the consumer is. So supply chains are moving towards nearshoring rather than offshoring what is happening in the past.
Industrialization has never been seen as an appealing sector by many young people. What about the youth? How are you attracting talents? This morning I was in a factory in the special economic zone, and I saw that there were young school boys and girls discovering how people were processing the wood in the plants.
I think what you've raised is a very fundamental question, because today, if you look in sub-Saharan Africa, there are about 29 million people who do not have jobs, and that number is going to go to about 120 million people in next 6 years. And it's so important to create jobs at all levels, because you will not just have jobs for engineers or for technical people. You will need jobs at all levels. And we have to realize also, not all these people are going to be engineers when they come out of colleges. So what we focus as a company is to create jobs at all sectors. And it's very important that we educate children about the importance of this. So we run various things. First, we run vocational training institutes that allow people to actually learn the jobs and the skills that are needed in this industrial zone, so they become employable. Secondly, at early age, we take college students to visit industrial zones and see that this work is also equally important for the country, and it's part of the overall value chain that allows people to appreciate it. And my belief is that we have seen we did an advertisement in Benin to attract people to, for an opening to train people. The advertisement was to recruit 1,000 people, and to our surprise, 126,000 people turned up. So that shows that there's enough and more people wanting to come and work in this sector. It's just a question of ensuring that they get the right information and they get the right pay.
What about Made in Africa on the international markets? African products have not always been promoted and marketed to be seen as high-end items. What is your take on that? This morning I also visited a very high-end luxury product store.
So I think you have raised a very important question which people ignore, is that today Africa itself is going to be a massive market. There's a massive demand within Africa, and most of the time people are just focused on exporting outside of Africa. So as a company, we focus on two things. First, we see what we can export within Africa, and secondly, what we can export outside. Now I'll start with a good example. So we built a soya plant in our industrial zone in Togo, and everybody said, oh, we'll export into Europe. And to our surprise, the soya meal is now getting exported into Ghana. Ghana used to earlier import this product all the way from Argentina. So there's a massive demand that is within Africa, and our industrial zones are also looking to cater to that. Now coming to your question, so we are very focused on putting African brands on the global scale, and that we started with Akiba. Akiba is our furniture brand that we opened the first store in Miami this year, in US in Miami this year, and then we are looking to now open in other parts of the world. I believe it's a journey, it will not happen overnight. So it's a 5 to 10 year journey, and you have to make some beginning. As you start putting the right product, as you start putting the right marketing, and more importantly, these products are very sustainable and traceable. And therefore, we strongly believe that in times to come, Made in Africa will become a much more demanded product.
And what would you like to tell the European companies watching us about what's happening here?
So I think a lot of times people ask me the question why European companies are not there. I think we also realize why European companies are not there, because these products that we are transforming traditionally were going to Asia for transformation. They were not going so much to Europe for transformation. So if you look at timber, about 80% timber exports were happening to China or to Asia for transformation. So it's but natural that those companies are coming and setting up here. But what I want to tell to European companies that these industrial zones are very important for success of these countries. And secondly, as companies, they have so much technical know-how, so much expertise that they can share with companies here and create nice joint ventures, and more importantly, take these products back to their markets and have healthy returns. So I would say that these countries are open for business, and more importantly, in our industrial zones, we create an ecosystem where you can get everything sorted out in less than 2 days, and you can start your business in less than a month, and more importantly, get the right returns in a very friendly manner.
Thank you very much, Gagan Gupta, for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that's it. Initiative Africa is over for today. You can find the interview of Gagan Gupta as well as our shows on our website, africaonair.com. And of course, feel free to follow us on all our social media channels by liking, sharing and commenting with the hashtag Initiative Africa. And don't forget, next week, same time, same channel, I'll see you again for a new edition of Business Africa. Have a great week. And until next time, goodbye.